created to have some fun together, sharing and singing. So, join and enjoy.
Our love for opera brings us together. Thanks for being with us in this trip.
Today, in a new program of Parlons on va parler de Les Pêcheurs de Perles, this splendid and very beautiful opera by Maestro Georges Bizet. Of course, this is not the first time you hear that name. You may be much more familiar with the name of Georges Bizet by his splendid composition of Carmen. La Carmen is by far one of the most represented operas on stage, and still, this opera, which was prior to La Carmen, this Pêcheurs de Perles, is not as known and it is not even a third as famous as it is Carmen. It doesn't mean that it is not a great composition, it's just that it's different, and maybe it was just not his time to get recognition for this opera. We also have to keep in mind to remember that Maestro Bizet died at a early age. He wasn't even 40 when he passed, so he had very few years to compose and to reach the level of maturity in that. For some people, Carmen is a masterpiece of opera, the best, not only his best composition, but for many one of the best operas ever written. But going back to Les Pêcheurs de Perles, which translated to English would be the Pearls Fishermen, if I remember well how it is usually translated. This opera has a very simple plot, to be sincere. But before we discuss more about the plot, what I would like to say today is that Maestro Bizet gave us in this opera three of the most beautiful compositions ever written. Of course, I am referring to the very nice, splendid, beautiful duet of Zurga and Nadir, Au fond du Temple Saint, of which we will talk about a little later. The, of course, great favorite, but not so easy to sing by many tenors, usually translated into Italian, which from my perspective sounds horrible. It is usually translated as Mi pardo dir ancor. The original name in French is Je crois entendre encore, a very beautiful aria of which we are going to give many more details a little ahead, and the also very beautiful aria by the soprano, in this case under the name of Leila, Comme autrefois, the name of her aria, also sung by many of the greatest sopranos of all times. And I think it is also worth mentioning that in this opera, Bizet has such a fine melody. There are so many very, very beautiful melodies that just flow one after another, as we will see in a few minutes. It is as if we were, from my perspective, of course, as if we were living in a dream, as if we were enchanted for the duration of the opera. And it is not only that it has very beautiful melodies and it has a very simple plot, but it is also very short if we compare it to other operas. So in less than 2 hours, we listen to this great composition where we will be witnesses of this continuous flow of melodies played by the orchestra, the choirs also so very well written, and the three masterpieces that I just mentioned. So let's not take more time in talking about, in not more the preamble of the content, and let's go for the story. The story opens and we have on stage the two main characters, the two main male characters, which are Zurga, the baritone, and Nadir, the tenor. We have to mention now that the voices that are needed in this opera, from my perspective, as always, of course, they need to be beautiful voices, of which really it doesn't depend on the honor. I mean, I am pretty sure every one of us would like to have a beautiful voice. Unfortunately, not all of us are equipped with a beautiful voice. So for those who are fortunate to have a beautiful voice, you already complied with the first requirement to sing Les Pêcheurs de Perles. The second one is a great musicality, which is harder to. Some people say that you acquire, some people say that you acquire throughout the study, but many other people think that you are born with it or you don't really have it no matter how much you study. So you need to have a beautiful voice, a great musicality, and and maybe more important than the two previous requirements, to have a great technique. So that's what makes things complicated, because if it is an opera with 3 masterpieces in there, not very long, why is not that often represented on a stage? And that is usually one of the reasons. You need 3 very beautiful voices, 3 very good technical singers with a great level of technique, and that are very, very musical themselves, not so easy to acquire. Also, I would like to mention that especially in the case of Leila, the soprano, they need to have a very homogeneous voice. So as you can see, there are more challenges in the vocal and musical perspective rather than in the plot. But going back to the presentation of the characters, we are about to face one of the, for at least for me, maybe the most beautiful duet ever written for the tesituras of the baritone and a tenor. And the story of this duet, called Au fond du temple saint, I am going to read a translation of it. Au fond du temple saint, says Nadir, Nadir says, parée de fleurs et d'or, une femme apparaît, je crois la voir encore. In the heart of the holy temple, decked with flowers and gold, a woman appears. I can still see her. At this point, I have to mention you that for most of the duet, Nadir is like living in a dream. He's like enchanted. He's not telling us, like, of course, he's with his friend Zurga, but we will listen to the way he narrates this, and I insist, it's like if it was an enchantment. Why do I say that? If you pay attention to the tone of the tenor and how it has to be, I have to say something before I forget it. It is written for the most part in piano and pianissimo. If you're familiar with those notes on the score, if you read some music, you're aware that pianissimo means like in low volume. And double P, pianissimo, means even lower, which is telling you that the tenor is not going for showing off. The tenor is like telling us his dream when he says, Au fond du temple saint, parlons d'un fleur et d'or, une femme apparaît, je crois la voir encore. Une femme apparaît, je crois la voir encore. I think or I feel like I still can see her. Surga replies, Une femme apparaît, je crois la voir encore. Repeating what Nadir has just said. Une femme apparaît, je crois la voir encore. Nadir still, like if he was still in his dream. The prostrated crowd looks at her in astonishment and softly murmurs, Look! It is the goddess who rises in the darkness and stretches out her arms to us. La folle prosternée, la regarde étonnée, elle murmure tout bas, voyez, c'est la laisse qui dans l'ombre se dresse vers nous dans les bras. And after saying, et vers nous tend les bras, and she stretches out her arms to us, Surga replies, her veil is lifting, a vision, a dream. The crowd is on its knees. As you can see, it is like a magical, as I was telling you, as if the two of them were in a dream, recalling what happened before. And Nadir says, but through the crowd she opens a way for herself. Mais à travers la foule, elle s'ouvre un passage. And Surga replies, her long veil already hides her face from us. Seul un voile déjà nous cache son visage. Nadir replies, my eyes, hélas, follow her in vain. Mon regard, hélas, la cherche en vain. Surga says, she disappears. Elle fuit. Nadir replies, elle fuit, mais dans mon âme soudain, quelle étrange ardeur s'allume. She disappears, but in my heart, what a strange passion is suddenly aroused. Surga replies, what new fire is this that consumes me? Quel feu nouveau me consume? Nadir says, your hand rejects mine. Surga replies also, your hand rejects mine. Nadir says, love masters our hearts and turns us into enemies. This small change of mood, this very short confrontation, doesn't have the drama of Bellismo, doesn't have the drama of Maestro Verdi. It has such a way, a quiet, still, interesting way of having this short confrontation where we will not see any exaggeration or excess of drama whatsoever, that after that those phrases they continue in the duet and they say no, que rien ne nous sépare, no, let nothing separate us, because they are friends. Nadir replies, no, rien, no, nothing will separate us. Surga insists, que rien ne nous sépare. Nadir replies, no, nothing. And Surga says, jurons de rester amis. Nadir says, jurons de rester amis. Jurons de rester amis. Jurons, oui, jurons de rester amis. This part of Jurons de rester amis makes reference to the other name of this duet. Many people call this duet the duet of friendship, making reference to the fact that they have shared with us that they were very close friends, only confronted by a short time by the love they had for the same woman, but they thought much better about it and decided that they would be friends for the rest of their lives and do not allow that the confrontation for love separate them. And then there is a repetition of the same melody that we have heard in the first part, where they have said, "Oui, c'est elle, c'est la déesse," saying, "Yes, it's her who looks like a goddess." Oui, c'est elle, c'est la déesse, un Seigneur qui vient à sonner, est fidèle à ma promesse, comme un vrai cheveu chéri. Qui vient à Seigneur sourire. Oui, partageons la même sang, soyons unis jusqu'à And now that we are talking about this that is called the duet of friendship, I would like to mention now in terms of being colleagues of a singer one another, there are unfortunately not so many versions of this duet where the tenor actually meets the baritone and the baritone meets the tenor. Usually the singers use this type of duets and this duet in special only to show who has a better breath duration, who reaches his high notes better, who can keep it for longer, and that is exactly what this duet is not about. Because this duet is about showing to the audience that two artists, the Nadir and Zurga, the roles in this case, can join their two voices to make a creation, to make a masterpiece out of this duet. That's what this duet is about. Not so easy to do because, egos are always on the first. That's the first. We have mentioned it in the past. If you have heard the previous series in a program in more than one program with Katia, we have talked a lot about the jealousy that singers have for each other, even if they are not of the same tesitura. So these duets are usually taken for a competition where, in fact, what we said wrote is a masterpiece of how two voices can mix together and create art as a result of it. I also would like to mention, because you know that I like to share with you this type of anecdotes, that this duet is one of the first duets that I heard a very good number of years ago, and I heard it in the voice of Jussi Björling. If you know who Jussi Björling was, the great Swedish tenor, of course, a tremendously beautiful voice, an excellent technique of Jussi Björling, and I heard it in the voice of Jussi Björling and Robert Merrill, the American baritone. They are the perfect example of how two voices can mix together and make art. From my perspective, the best version of this duet is Jussi Björling's and Robert Merrill's version. I have also to confess that I even bought a CD of duets only because it had the version of Jussi's and Robert's in it. Of course, there are more duets of Jussi Björling with other singers and sopranos, but for me, this version with Robert Merrill is by far the best you can hear. Also, I would like to refer you to the duet song by Maestro Alfredo Kraus, of which we are going to talk about a little later. He sang it a number of times with different baritones. Unfortunately, not all as successful and as nice as the one as I was mentioning of Jussi Björling's and Robert Merrill's. Krauss was not as fortunate to have a baritone who would like to follow and make art out of it. And also, if you are familiar with the voice of Maestro Alfredo Krauss, you know that Maestro Alfredo Krauss excels in technique, and his voice was very good, a very good match for this role. If you also have the chance of listening to Alfredo Krauss singing this duet, please do so. There are a good number of versions of it in YouTube, if that is the place where you look for music. And now, still in the same first act, where we have learned that they have sworn each other to keep themselves friends, arrives a priestess, veiled priestess, that Nadir discovers to be in fact the love for which him and Zurga in the past had fought about. So it hasn't taken many minutes since he started singing the friendship duet, and he's already thinking of going after Leila. That's how much he really wanted to keep his promise. And of course, he makes reference to love. And I don't think that Nadir is a bad guy who wanted to commit treason to his friend. I think this is just a young guy who finds it difficult to control his emotions. That's what I think. It's a matter of not being strong enough to stand by your word, and that you let yourself be carried away by the emotions that this woman inspires in you. And now it is time to talk about the second masterpiece. Now, the masterpiece of Bizet for the tessitura of the tenor, and of course we are talking now about of Je crois entendre un cœur. I think I can still listen to her. I think I can still hear her voice. This aria that is about to be sung by Nadir is in fact not only for me one of the most beautiful arias ever written for a tenor, but also one of the most difficult ones. When you think of Que gelida manina, se la lasci riscaldar. Of course, it has some difficulty in the musicality, that it is very well known. Everybody is expecting Rodolfo to reach the high C at the end of this beautiful Que gelida manina. But when you hear to Je crois entendre un cœur, Je crois entendre un cœur, it does not have a high C, but in its place has something even much more difficult to sing. It is again written in piano and pianissimo with very few parts where you are allowed to go for forte, so means that you have to sing it quietly. This aria is not to be sung shouted. It is not to be exaggerated. It is not to be yelled. With that being said, it has been very few tenors who have sung it correctly. Just to mention a few of them, of course, Jussi Björling, of course, Maestro Alfredo Krauss, of course, I think there are recordings of Tito Schipa, if I remember well, and from my perspective, the best singer for this role is Maestro Guetta. You may have heard about this very famous tenor because Nikolai Guetta sang a good number of roles. He sang in a good number of languages. He had a very good technique. His voice could do what he wanted him to do without any excess. So Maestro Guetta is a very good reference of how this has to be sung. This cannot be sung in full voice. It is not Je crois entendre encore, but it has to be Je crois entendre encore caché sur le palais By the way, I'm just trying to share with you how the melody line would be. Da, 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 da. If you listen to it, it's like what I was sharing with you. Nadir is living in thinking or in recalling this. It's like if he was in a dream, enchanted in such a dream that time seems not to pass by. He's in this abstraction of recalling what happened before, that the voice being sung like floated, not in full voice, makes sense. Da, 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 By the way, Maestro Bizet wrote something close to impossible to sing, because in the phrase where he says "fol ivresse," the "s" goes for a B, and it is to be sung in crescendo of the previous notes. Ivresse, ivresse is pianissimo, double P. We have explained in the past that when you go for a high note, it is usually higher in volume. And what Maestro Bizet is requesting here is that your voice actually does the opposite. Goes for a much smaller volume when you are reaching the highest note in the score. That makes it impossible. So it is usually sung. Some people say that it has to be sung like in falsetto. And the thing about in falsetto is that the voice may sound too white and false. It may even have a not very nice sound in there. So I would say from my perspective that if you manage to float it, that is fair enough. But sing it full voice, it's just the only thing that you shouldn't be doing. The repetition of "Oh, clarté de cette heure, je crois entendre la voix entreouvrir ses longs voiles au volontiers du soir. On y enchanteresse divine ravissante, au souvenir charmante, folie ivresse de rêve, charmant souvenir. And right after that charmant souvenir, that memory that has enchanted me, says Nadir. There is a phrase that is not written, but that tenors like to add it because otherwise it feels like they have sung an incomplete aria, so they repeat the final phrase. Charmant souvenir. And I think that depending on the singer, his style and the type of voice that he has, I think that the best way to wrap this aria is making or singing as if your voice, you keep the diminuendo and until it almost disappears. We also in the previous series have explained some of these ornaments and names that these effects have in singing. So when it says of course, the singer has to keep the diminuendo for the adequate amount of time so that it doesn't sound like he's showing off his breath, but it has to be like he's losing himself and his thoughts in the memory of that woman called Layla. Of course, he hasn't said that it is Layla, I am telling you. So you picture in your mind that you have a memory of somebody and your voice disappears with every second as you say that souvenir of love. That's the emotion that Nadir has to bring us in this aria. And just to wrap up my comments on this aria, even though it is a great favorite of tenors who can actually sing it, it is very hard to see it being sung live because it is very difficult. The things that I explained about singing it pianissimo, double pianissimo in the high note, going for crescendos, diminuendos, and all that is very difficult to do it live. So that is the perfect way for a singer to crack his voice, and in Spanish we say que se le salga un gallo. It has many technical challenges. That's why I was saying a little earlier that it is far more difficult than La Gelida Manina if we compare. But of course, if you want to go and look for Nicolai's Gueda rendition of this aria, I am pretty sure that if you hadn't heard it before, you will definitely fall in love with it. But okay, let's move for the following act. Right after the arrival of Layla, who is a priestess there, you may have noticed that I have not referred or have not talked a lot more about the plot of this story that happens to be in what is supposed to be a small village of people who live out of getting pearls out of the ocean. It's a very simple plot, a triangle of love as usual, with two very good friends who at the end Nadir cannot keep his promise and goes back to the love of Layla, and Layla is in fact also in love with Nadir, as we are about to hear. And what is it that Layla tells us? Before I start telling you about the content of her beautiful aria, I was telling you that Maestro Bizet gave us 3 masterpieces in this opera, and it is the case, this is the third one, the aria for Layla. To sing this aria for Layla, I have to go back to my comment earlier today when I was telling you that you need 3 very accomplished singers with excellent technique, musicality, and especially in the case of Layla with a very homogeneous voice. Of course, you may be thinking that if you have a good technique, then your voice is homogeneous. That is, of course, true, but we have to say it is partially true because there are voices who are naturally homogeneous, which is a gift from my perspective. And it has to be a very homogeneous and very beautiful voice because the whole role of Layla is written in such nice, continuous melodies. It is, if you allow me to compare, and maybe you would, and I think you would disagree, is that it is like the roles that Puccini wrote for his heroines. Layla is in a way the preferred female role for Bizet, and she starts saying, "Me voilà seule dans la nuit," and here I am alone in the night. Seul, in this sort of recitativo, I have to say this first part of her aria is the recitativo. Seul à ce lieu désert, où règne le silence. In this a lonely place where only silence reigns. Je frissonne, j'ai peur. I am afraid. I am very afraid. I tremble. Et le sommeil me fuit. And, that willing of sleeping has just left me. This peur, this frightness that I feel has made my sleep to go away. Mais, as she looks in the distance, she says, mais il est là. Mon cœur devine sa présence. But he is there. My heart can tell he is there. In that voice, also in this solitude, in this monologue, in this recitativo, is how Leila is telling us how she feels about Nadir. And that's where the aria actually starts, known as Comme autrefois dans la nuit sombre, like in those old days in the dark night. Comme autrefois dans la nuit sombre, caché sur les feuillages Perles. Like in those times in the dark night, hidden than le feuillage épais, referring to the plants, the feuillage, in fact, that was very thick. He was hiding there, looking, taking care of her from there. Il veille près de moi dans l'ombre. He is keeping this veillage près de moi, still close to me, taking care of me, dans l'ombre. Je puis dormir, rêver en paix. This quietness, if you have experienced the opportunity of have somebody you love, who you know is taking care of you while you sleep, is what Leila is telling us. Je puis dormir, rêver en paix. Je puis dormir, rêver en paix. I can sleep, I can dream in peace. Il veille près de moi, comme autrefois, comme autrefois. If you notice, this is the third time, this third masterpiece has a very similar intention as the two previous ones, in the sense that their arias are like a memory where they are enchanted and taken away from reality for a few minutes. And she keeps telling us, c'est lui, mes yeux l'ont reconnu, c'est lui, mon âme est rassurée, oh bonheur, joie inespérée, pour me revoir, il est venu, oh bonheur, il est venu, il est là, près de moi. And it is him, because my eyes have recognized him. It's him. My soul reste assurée. My soul is comforted. What or how lucky I am. This unexpected joy. Pour me revoir, il est venu. He's come and he has come only to see me. Oh joie, il est venu. Il est près de moi. He's so close to me. Comme autrefois dans la nuit sombre. Repeating, caché sous les feuillages épais, il veille près de moi dans l'ombre. Je puis dormir, rêver en paix. Je puis dormir, rêver en paix. And if you have noticed, Leila repeats, there are very few phrases in her aria, but the beauty and the challenge for the soprano here is to sing it with all the musical variations written it in here and make it sound, even if repeated, beautiful and different every time she repeats these parts. Comme autrefois, comme autrefois. There is a little ornament, there is a cadenza at the end of the aria, je puis rester. The thing about this cadenza is that if it is not sung properly, if the soprano exceeds, then the enchantment of the aria by Leila is broken. The most important here is to keep the atmosphere that Leila has shared with us. So after these ornaments that have to be sung so beautifully, so perfect, she says, because she wants to. When she says rester en paix, she doesn't mean dying. She means I can rest and feel in peace. And again, the same comment that I did for Nadi's aria, I think it's still valid. If she keeps en it's more effective than if she just says burn, because that doesn't go with the role or with the personality of Leila. If you notice, the three masterpieces are written for these very musical, beautiful voices. The three masterpieces can be wrapped in a similar way. The three of them sung in this tone of enchantment of living a dream. And it is this atmosphere that Bizet brought to us in Les Pêcheurs de Perles. It's like if he was telling us a very nice fairy tale where you can get away from reality and dream of love and beautiful, very beautiful melodies that were composed by Maestro Bizet. Thank you very much for having joined me on this very beautiful dream and melodies of Les Pêcheurs de Perles.